How do you stop resenting your ADHD partner, and what should you never say to them? I'm Dr. Christine Hargrove, a couples therapist who specializes in ADHD, and today I'm answering the internet's biggest questions on navigating relationships when ADHD is in the mix. Does ADHD cause relationship problems? Yes, it can. So what we know from research is that individuals with ADHD are more likely to have shorter relationships, more stressful and dissatisfying relationships, and in some cases, the evidence is that ADHD is associated with higher rates of divorce. What I see in my practice is that this is most common with untreated or unmanaged ADHD symptoms, but ADHD really doesn't have to be a death sentence for a relationship. In fact, many relationships thrive for decades when one or both partners have ADHD. ADHD can keep life interesting and fun, especially when couples and partners play to their strengths. So one person can be the person keeping it interesting, keeping it novel, choosing a new place to go, finding a new hobby. And as long as everyone feels that the divisions are fair in the relationship, relationships can last a really long time. What not to say to an ADHD partner? Anything that starts with, "Have you tried?" or "Why don't you just?" Stop and take a minute before you say either one of those. Whatever's coming next, pause. Because odds are good, if you're about to suggest something that's sort of obvious and straightforward, they've already tried it and it didn't work. When you have ADHD, life is more complicated than a simple solution, because if that worked, it would have worked. When people suggest to you ideas that are really obvious, what it does is it makes you feel like they think you're dumb or that you are lazy, and it demonstrates that they really don't get what it's like for you. If you find yourself saying, "Have you tried?" switch it to, "What have you already tried?" You'll save yourself a lot of time, and you'll learn that they've actually been working on this for quite a while, and they might have some ideas for what they want to try next. And that's where you can step into support. How do I stop resenting my ADHD partner? The first step in not resenting your partner with ADHD is to recognize that ADHD is something they live with, not a character deficit that they are choosing to have. Second, you can recognize the relationship patterns that are contributing to that sense of resentment, not just their part in the patterns, but your own as well. So you can recognize when you're participating in this dynamic that is leading to you feeling resentful, and you can start stepping back or finding another resource to loop in. You can talk with your partner really openly about it. You can work with a couples therapist. That can be a great choice. I think additionally, a lot of times we think that resentment is maybe the lesser evil, that we're protecting the relationship by swallowing the thing that we want to say. But in the end, that's really just poisoning your relationship bit by bit. So bring the things out into the open, talk about them, and find a different solution besides just me feeling resentful and you feeling judged. What is ADHD spouse burnout? ADHD spouse burnout is that sense of chronic exhaustion from being your partner's executive function 24/7. So spouse burnout is really common when somebody feels like they really didn't want to be doing this and they don't know how to get out of that role. If this is you, first realizing the moments when you are serving as your partner's kind of prefrontal cortex, when you're functioning for them that you really don't want to be. Talking with your partner without shame, without blame, but say, "Hey, I notice in these situations, I'm kind of stepping in a lot and I'd really like to be able to step back. So let's talk about some ways that we can ensure that we still have whatever the outcomes are, like make sure the kids are getting picked up from school, but I don't have to be kind of keeping track of it and feeling responsible for it. So what do you think you need to be able to take more of a sense of ownership over this part of our lives together?" How do you balance the mental load when one or both partners have ADHD? So the mental load is keeping track of all of the different parts of life. So even if you're not actually the one doing all of the tasks, you feel responsible for maybe making sure that they get done. The important thing with balance is that it needs to feel fair to both partners overall. There, of course, may be some temporary situations where one person's kind of carrying a lot of the burden, but overall it needs to feel fair. There are 3 really great ways of coping with stress. So research shows us that 50-50 or common coping is a wonderful way to deal with stress. Another great way is something called supportive coping. That's where one person is really the main person dealing with it and the other person's like right there with them along the way. And the third one is delegated coping, where one person's like, I'll go get the kids, you go pick up dinner, and we'll all arrive back here at the same time. All 3 of those forms of coping can feel fair. They're really, really healthy. And what matters is that it feels fair to you. How do I support my ADHD partner? Well, the first way to support them is to treat their ADHD as real. Recognize the invisible barriers that make life more difficult when you have ADHD. Ask them how you can come alongside them and partner with them, support them. What do they need? You might have ideas too about what they need to deal with some of the tasks. And third, make sure that any form of support that you're willing to give to your partner is something that is helpful and that is sustainable. And that means that it's not going to be overly draining. You're not going to end up burnt out, because once you start these patterns, you're probably going to keep them up for a really long time. By the way, do you have a go-to strategy for stopping resentment in its tracks? Share your tips with the community in the comments. It's me. I'm the community. How does ADHD affect intimacy? So at the beginning of a relationship, ADHD can make intimacy amazing, right? We've got that hyper-focus, that intense interest in our partner, and it can just be an incredible period of the couple relationship. And then real life sets in and day-to-day life gets kind of boring. That physical intimacy can feel repetitive. So a great approach can be to be intentional about keeping things interesting. Those day-to-day interactions with your partner are actually the building blocks of a long-term sense of intimacy, physical, emotional, and keeping things novel and new can be a great way to keep that spark alive. What are your tips for managing relationship struggles when both partners have ADHD? So first, both partners need to take ownership of their own ADHD. What that looks like for any given person is slightly different, but both of you need to take ownership of it for yourselves. Second, whenever possible, play to your strengths. So usually couples, like one partner is good at something and another partner is good at something else. So like one partner is really interested in cooking and the other partner kind of has a better sense of time or maybe manages a calendar. Okay. Be the point person on each one of those things. And third, if there's something that neither one of you is particularly good at, either loop in outside help or like an outside system, or figure out a good enough approach. It doesn't have to be perfect or even neurotypical ideal to be good enough for you to live a good life together. What tips do you have for improving communication for ADHD couples? So there are really 2 types of communication. There's the day-to-day, who's doing what type of communication. And in that case, I think, keeping stuff written down or, saying like, text me if you need something from the store, make it easy to do the things that you want to do for each other. The second form of communication that's important is more serious stuff, like the reason that people would see a couples counselor. Maybe it's arguing, maybe it's a really painful subject. If possible, try to talk face to face. ADHD makes it really hard to read social cues over text or email, especially with the rejection sensitivity that's so common. And when you talk face to face, you're able to glean that sense of connection with your partner and really understand what they're trying to say, not just the words that are coming out. And ADHD brains love closure, but it's important with deeper or more important conversations to know that not every conversation has to be finished in one go. It can be really difficult to stop a conversation when it doesn't feel fully resolved. One way I recommend to my couples to do that is to write down what you were about to say and set it aside. And then when you pick it up again later, that's where you start the next conversation. My partner doesn't believe I have ADHD. What should I do? This can be really frustrating. Whether you know that you have ADHD, whether you strongly suspect you have ADHD, this is a pretty common thing that individuals with ADHD face. So the first thing to do would be to ask questions like, what do you know about ADHD? Maybe your partner has like a completely outdated understanding of what ADHD is. And in that case, bringing them up to date. There's a lot of wonderful resources about getting to know adult ADHD, especially what adult ADHD looks like in women. Questioning them, you might find out that they're afraid of stigma, that they're afraid of what others might think, maybe what their family might think. That can be a great opportunity to loop in help, go talk to somebody, maybe do some long conversations about what does this mean for us as a couple. In the end, though, what matters is that you feel like you're in a relationship that feels respectful and kind. But you don't have to keep convincing your partner that something is true about your experience. It's okay for you to just have your experience and let them either adjust to it or not. I think my partner has undiagnosed ADHD. Should I tell them? I mean, you can, but I can't guarantee how well that's going to go. I actually think that partners of individuals with undiagnosed ADHD can be really great reporters, right? So with ADHD, we tend to underreport our own symptoms. So having someone reflect back to us, not something that you're doing wrong all the time, but rather here are ways that it seems like life gets really hard or tricky for you. Here are things that feel complicated. And these kind of align with this thing called ADHD. Do you think that you might want to look into it? And if so, I'd be supportive. And the thing about getting a diagnosis is that it unlocks a whole set of resources and advice of people who have gone before, who have already figured out tons of ways to make life easier for those of us with ADHD. My ADHD partner won't get treatment. What now? I've seen this before. It can be really frustrating. The first thing that you can do is to relieve yourself of the responsibility to make them get treatment. You can't actually make them get treatment. They have to decide that they want to seek treatment. The second thing is to recognize ways in which you are kind of managing their ADHD, especially if there are patterns that are leading you to feel really resentful or frustrated with your relationship. When you catch that, you can take a step back from some of those roles. Maybe you tell your partner, I used to manage this. I'd really like to manage it less. I'm not going to be managing it as much. And what that does is it creates this space for your partner to loop in other resources or other forms of support for their ADHD instead of just you. And that may involve them deciding that they need to get some treatment. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, we actually have a lot more content like this on our channel, so make sure to subscribe. By doing so, you can help to further Understood's mission, which is to make sure that the 70 million people with learning and thinking differences like ADHD and dyslexia can thrive.